Everybody, good afternoon. Thank you and welcome for joining our session on enterprise innovation through consolidation. We're super excited to have our Walmart team here share their story. Towards the end of this, we'll ask for some Q&A, so save questions, and we'll happily address them later on. And we'll try and hang around for a bit after the session as well to address any questions that you might come up with. So with that, I'm going to pass to my colleague Chris here. We'll introduce the team. This is going to be a great session, so please save questions, and we'll happily answer anything we can. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. It's my privilege to serve as Walmart's dedicated customer success manager here at Zoom, so I'm excited to introduce these guys here. First off, we have Mr. Case Murphy, who's sitting there on your left. Case Murphy is a 20-year veteran in the unified communications field. Over the last 18 months, he has led the Walmart voice and video team into a DevOps model focused on product lifecycle and agile way of working. His product line responsibility extends from the physical to the virtual meeting space, which includes video, telephony, messaging, streaming, and digital signage. Prior to Walmart, Case developed and managed unified communication platform at both Time Warner and AOL. And now I'd like to introduce Nick. Nick Dowd has 10 years of experience in front-end development and currently 2 years with the voice and video engineering team at Walmart. Nick began his career at Walmart starting as a Scrum Master 2 years ago and moved into the product owner role shortly after. Nick has been leading the rollout of Zoom within Walmart and continues to innovate ways to improve the associate digital experience. Ladies and gentlemen, Case Murphy and Nick Dowd.
All right. Hopefully the AV works. I know, we always say that before we get on stage. AV people. It works. So we'll get started. Guys, I'm Case Murphy. You heard the introduction. We are super excited to be here. We've had a pretty incredible year with Zoom, and we're going to kind of tell that story of why we did it. So it's an exciting time in our industry, right? Oh, wow. I will have to say this, that human beings live will look larger and older than the human beings that you see up there. Wow. Wow. We have a great designer. Okay, so it's an incredibly exciting time for us, especially in our industry. We're coming together with all these platforms. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how we did that, the decisions we made at Zoom. I'm joined by Nick Dowd, my product owner. So he's going to I'm going to talk for a little bit. We're going to save time for questions. And then Nick's going to talk about, how we did it, why we did it, and where we are. But first, let's talk about why Zoom, which will let these graphics go up and talk. So the first thing I want to talk about is, why did we pick Zoom? Well, it was extremely important that we reached out to our associates and started having the conversation of what doesn't work, right? Let's get the feedback. Let's hear from them right away. So if you're not having those feedback sessions when you're first starting your pilot or first discussing Zoom, it's extremely important. This is what we heard from our associates. Make it simple. One place to communicate. It should just work. How many people have heard that out there? It should just work. It should just work. Mobile first. Consolidate all these products. I don't know where to find anybody. I don't know how to chat to people. You've got 3 different places to chat, and we'll talk through that a little bit. Where do I make a call? Is it on Slack now? Is it on Jabber? There's so many different places we could have made a call. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a path for our users. A true call escalation path. And let me talk about where we get excited and why I want to talk about this for a second. We want to start and give our associates one place to go to start an instant message, scale that to a soft phone video call, all the way up to a 10-person video call, 20, doesn't matter, push of a button, automated into a 10,000-person webinar. And then if we want to send it over to a streaming platform like MS Stream or anything like that, we want that all to be able to happen just seamlessly. That's what we want to get to call escalation. So when we started talking about why Zoom, we looked at their roadmaps, had those conversations, everything from a soft phone to where they were going coming up in Chat 2.0. I think we could talk about is all pretty exciting stuff that you'll learn about here. When we talked about that roadmap a year ago, kind of when we started this small pilot, they were already ahead of the game, speaking the same language of where we wanted to get that call escalation. Okay, and then there's the cost savings, right? Obviously, the cost savings, they have a very strategic competitive pricing. We talked all through that. It was very exciting, but you have to remind yourselves, if the user experience is not optimal, then pricing isn't really the important part, right? If we're just paying for a bad platform, that's hugely important to remember. So Zoom made it easy for our users to switch, and they really did. The focus on user experience, mobility, all made it an easy choice, right? Quality first. I want to talk about, within my team, I have a few strategic pillars, but 3 of them that I want to talk about that Zoom fit into perfectly were stabilize and optimize. That was one of our first-year pillars. Empowered data, which is hugely important. And finally, the 1-minute meeting, which is kind of like our North Star, our goal. And I've talked a few times about the 1-minute meeting, but that's all the way from wayfinding, scheduling, to being in the conference room and starting your meeting anywhere, anytime should be under a minute. That's our North Star, right? So that's one of our pillars. Zoom fit into all those areas. As we started talking about wayfinding, as we started talking about conference rooms and Zoom rooms and what does that look like and how does it connect into our infrastructure, all those conversations we were having at the beginning of our proof of concept to where we are now. Love the graphics. Okay, so it's not me, it's you. So many times we have this relationship with our vendors, with our partners, that it's hey, why isn't Zoom working? And I'll use Zoom. Well, it's your network, right? No, it's your app, right? All of those things, it's not me, it's you, it's not me. We had to cut that down and get right to the transparent conversations we needed to have to get to where we wanted to be. And that's the it's not you, it's me culture. So how do we do that? A couple of ways, and Nick's going to talk a little bit more about this too coming. Honesty is the best policy. Keeping their word, us keeping our word, us being transparent, all of that was the best way to get to where we needed to be. We told them where our story wanted to go, they told us where their story was going, and we started to work together in a lot of different areas. So, one of them being a modern platform, right? User experience. We listened to Zoom, and Zoom listened to us and our associate. We held customer feedback sessions, lots of them, over and over again. We would take that information, bring it back into the product, so that when we were ready to release to the masses, we call it an MVP, right? But we had all of our use cases covered. And that's the conversation that we had months and months before. We had weekly touch bases. We had those on every level, from our support engineers into our high-level design engineers, all the way through, had weekly meetings. So that brings us to a new and agile way of working. See, they're agile because they're on the wire. Love to have to call out my graphics. All right. So, an agile way of working, right? We came into Scrum, we moved to a DevOps model, then we started in Kanban, didn't work exactly right, so we started over into Scrum really heavy, and now our team is operating pretty darn well in this area. But what we had to do is make sure that Zoom was working in the same way. So with those conversations, we started matching our 2-week sprints together. They started coming into our Scrum ceremonies, so they would hear where we were going on our roadmap and hear from our Scrum Masters. They became part of our Scrum team, and that was hugely important. The other side was being transparent out, and Nick will talk to this. It's hugely important that our customers know where we're going, they know our roadmap. Nick did a very daring thing a couple months ago. He published our roadmap out onto Workplace so that anybody could click through it and see when we were saying we were going to release, what we were going to release, how we were going to release it, when they were coming up. It's a very daring move, but our customers know what to expect from us. So they know, okay, in October this is coming out. If it doesn't come out, if we don't hit our dates, we communicate that too. It's all about that transparent conversation. And Nick will speak through some of that coming up. So we continue to look at what is next. What's coming up next? We come to events like this, the Digital Workplace event. We're looking at the industry, but we do customer feedback every other week on our products to figure out what do they want next, to get ahead of those use cases, to have those conversations, and Zoom is part of that. So that's been a real interesting relationship that we've built out that made everything come to where we are now, which is kind of where I'm going to bring Nick Dowd up to have the conversation about where we are and where we're going.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So Case did a great job giving us the what and the why. I want to talk to you a little bit about the how, because we shifted a fairly large enterprise, right, from one platform to another. And we shifted about 70% of that usage in the span of 90 days. So we were very, very aggressive, and we attacked it. But just to give you some context around the change, 2.3 million global users, 60 plus million meeting minutes every month across 23 countries. So that's what we went into this looking to shift, right? We needed to figure out how to get these users to move from a platform they'd been using for years onto a brand new platform, which isn't always the easiest thing in the world to do. So our first step is in communications, right? One of the things that we wanted to do and wanted to do early was identify who our user groups were. So we knew we wanted to target our hosts, right? If you can change the host, you change the participants. So your hosts are your primary user group. They're the ones doing all the scheduling. Participants are basically going to dial into whatever platform is in their meeting invite, right? So you change your host, you change your usage. And then we wanted to tailor the messaging to those users, right? We wanted it to be personalized. So we gave usage information within an email that went out to the hosts to give them some personal information about how they're using platforms and how they can change, right? How they can use the new platform in the same ways they were using the old platform. The next thing that we wanted to focus on is top-down communications, right? Broad corporate communications are great. They get to all of your users, but how many people already have filters in their Outlook, right? That just filters all of those things into a folder and you never look at it. Because you know it's corporate communications and everybody's gotten it. So what we try to do is go out to business leaders across our organization, right? Across the enterprise. Go out to business leaders in our international markets, business leaders across our retail business, across logistics. We wanted to get those leaders to buy into the new platform, how they can use it specifically for their business unit to become more efficient and effective at communicating and collaborating. So we gave them the tools then to communicate down to their groups, right? Because getting a corporate communication gets filtered, but if your VP sends you an email, you open it and you read the thing. So communicating that way, it's just a more powerful message when it's coming from a direct leader versus just a standard corporate communication. The next thing we did was training, right? We wanted to make sure that we were showing people how to use the new tool. And at the same time, trying to promote some of the new benefits that were provided by the new tool versus things that we didn't have previously. So we actually scheduled large-scale webinars. We let people join at their leisure, right? We just communicated out the schedules and just went through training sessions. We had open Q&A times that we would just be on a call and we would have 8 or 10 of us on it at one time. People would jump in, we would answer their questions, walk them through different scenarios. Worked out really, really well. But the other thing that we did that's very specific is we tailored all of our international training to those markets. So we did everything in country and in language. So we took the base training sets that we were working in the US, we had it all translated, the decks translated, and we found, with Zoom's help, people in each market who spoke very naturally the language, and they presented the training to that user base. So we tried to make it as comfortable as possible. And then we did some more tailored training with each business unit. So those leaders that we worked with in our communications plan, we actually scheduled times with the teams underneath those leaders and did very tailored training. So rather than just a generic training that people can jump in on, we tailored the training around the business unit. How do they use the tool? So we did went and found some information, figured out how they were using it, what their use cases were, and then tailored the training to show them how to best use it for what they needed. So don't be afraid to draw a line in the sand. When we think about rolling out a new platform, right, it can be very overwhelming. So we tend to put together a 6-month plan or a 12-month plan or an 18-month plan and go, okay, I can do this in a year and a half. I can get everybody moved over in a year and a half. because you don't want the uprising that comes when you start pulling away tools that people have been using for a really long time. So we kind of took the tear the Band-Aid off approach, right? We drew some lines in the sand, but the keys to that are communicating really well, right? For one, you have to be really transparent about where you're going, what your timelines are, and your users really need to know that you have their best interests at heart, right? So our feedback loops, we're constantly communicating with our customers. They can see those things added to our roadmaps, so they know we're listening, and they know that we're trying to do the best we can to put a platform in front of them that suits their needs. But prolonging a change like that is really just delaying the inevitable, right? That uprising is going to come whether you do it in 90 days or if you do it in 6 months or if you do it in 12 months. So there's really just no sense in delaying. Just get the change done and put it out there for people. When you decide to rip the Band-Aid off like that, one thing that you have to be ready for is you have to be prepared to support your customer, because they're going to come to you with a use case that they didn't think about, right? Or a use case that they don't think you can handle. Or they're having issues with the application, or they don't know where to install it, and it's going to come in a mad rush because you've now drawn a line in the sand and you've said you've got to make this change and you've got to make it very quickly. So you've got to be prepared for those folks to take care of what their needs are. So customer service in that aspect is very, very, very important. And again, I just want to stress always listening to your customers, right? Feedback from the customer is great. The positive stuff is what you like to hear, but the negative stuff is what you have to hear, right? So always take that stuff, take that feedback, figure out how to make your product better. Keeping your plan out and open, right, where others can see it, that's key as well. And when people know that you have their needs in mind, it builds trust between you and your customer. All right, and that finishes for me.
Yeah, so I think, Chris, we'll go into questions from the audience, but speaking to what Nick was just talking about, right? All of that communication with the customer, all of bringing that feedback, building the relationship and partnership with the vendor and being part of that way of working is what's extremely important. Because if we take that feedback and it doesn't get to Zoom and we say, here's our pain point, then they're not going to put it back in their product lifecycle, and then we're doing nothing. And now we're just fighting back and forth. So all of that communication that happens with our associates needs to happen with your vendor partner also. And that's that building that agile way of working.
Well, can we give Case and Nick a round of applause, please?
Thank you.
Well, thank you, guys. We've got just a few questions here. I know Dave and I are eager to ask a few questions. I'm sure you all are as well, so we'll start the conversation and have an open Q&A session here in just a moment. First question for you guys, though. You think of the scale of this and the size of this rollout and all the different teams that have to come together internally to make this happen, security, network. How did you guys do that? How did you build that into the rollout process for Zoom?
Yeah, from my side, this is kind of an interesting story, so I will tell it. So we had a different platform, as we've kind of talked about, and we moved off of that. Our first thing that we did as a product group was to go in and optimize our network, right? Optimize all the way through the stack, security stack, client, got all those team members in the room and started having that conversation. So we were optimizing for ourselves internally, no matter what stack we were on. Building that relationship at the beginning. At the end of it, we realized it wasn't the product we wanted, and then now we can tell the Zoom story of how we moved over. But that initial meeting where we brought all those leaders in together and we had the conversation in a war room and said, are we optimized for a cloud platform? Are we looking at that security stack? Where are our pain points? What are our customers saying? Okay, you say our VPN's great, but we're having some VPN issues. Why is that happening? We had those conversations before we even started moving over to another product, and that was hugely important.
Got it. Nick, you talked a lot about driving communications through leaders and kind of that top-down messaging to make sure that everyone's on board. How did you get the leaders on board, right? Because there's so many things that we ask of our people to deliver down to their teams. Like, how did you get them to champion that message downward, I guess?
Yeah, so the really important thing there is to make sure that when you're having those conversations, you're listening, right? Listening is a lost art. But listen to those leaders, listen to their associates, understand how they're trying to use it, and then build the case around that, right? Make sure that they know how their teams can benefit and how their teams specifically can use the platform to be more productive. And anytime you start talking to a leader about their teams being more productive, it gets easy from there.
And can I jump in and talk about something? So coming into Walmart, I think 20 months ago is when I've been here, so just under 2 years. There's a culture shift going on that's amazing, right? And the speed we move. So it's having a conversation about culture shift and our way of working that is also extremely important. So with that culture shift came, I'll call out my VP, Joe, he happens to be here, but he was part of that culture shift. We came in about the same time, was being able to fail quickly, right, and recover fast, whatever that is. So when we came in, and this is kind of an interesting story, Joe's like, hey, I gave Zoom to Clay on his mobile device. Clay's our CIO, which is not a normal way of working. It is for us now. And so the next thing, I'm on my way home driving, and I get a call from Clay on Zoom, and he's in his car, which is not safe. That's why they have the safe driving mode. Just everybody swipe left. And he's like, so he was like, Case, this is unbelievable. I just found your name and I clicked on it and was able to call over 4G and was so excited about it. So, but what part of that culture shift was him understanding that if it wasn't 100% perfect, right, we were going to recover in our 2-week sprint and make it perfect. And that changing that culture is extremely important, and that starts with the conversations at the top that Nick was talking about.
Awesome. And I've got one kind of follow-up question to that, and I'll use your words, to avoid the uprising or that might come. Like, what kind of tools did you have in place for the teams to be able to use to help roll out Zoom? Because I know you built like an intranet site internally.
Sure.
Did you help craft communications that then leaders could lift and take to their teams? What was that like from a toolkit perspective?
Yeah, so just to be clear, there is no relieving the uprising. It's going to happen, okay? So I definitely don't want to be quoted as saying, hey, you said this could be done without an uprising. No, the uprising's coming. So, but to answer the question, we actually use many tools. We have several communications channels, email probably being our primary. We did build an intranet site where we basically built out a front page that told users why we were moving to Zoom, right? Why we liked it and why we were using it. We put training docs in, we put training videos in, and we put FAQs in. I mean, everything we could think of to communicate, right? And it's kind of a living document. As we go through and we collect feedback from users and we see what kinds of issues they're running into trying to use it, we make sure we add those things into those FAQs and those training materials to make sure that we're getting that message out.
And the tailored, and Nick was great at this, along with the team, the tailored messaging was extremely important that he had talked about earlier, because what it looks like to the associates a lot of times is great, just another tool, right? We have another tool out here to communicate, why are you doing this? So when he tailored the messaging to, this is a use case it solves for you and why it makes it better, and this is why we're going to it, right? And we talk about the call escalation one platform, but really tailoring that down and going, we're fixing this for you, we listened, and this is how we're fixing it, and Zoom's helping us do it, really helped with the uprising.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. And in line with that as well, the communication, the openness, the information to the associates. Also, you used a phrase about tearing off the Band-Aid, which is awesome. So at what point during the process, and maybe based on what information, could you choose when to draw the line in the sand? How did you reach that decision?
Great question.
Yeah, so how did we reach the line in the sand, or how did we get there?
Yeah.
We kind of just put an aggressive plan together. We outlined what our milestones were for making the change. We were aggressive when we set the deadlines, and we've worked very hard to make those deadlines. Does that mean we hit every one? No. There's been a couple times that we have to push back, right? And we go, okay, we didn't communicate well, so let's take another look at it, and maybe this date gets pushed out a little bit. And, but we did set those milestones. We set them with aggressive dates, and then we just worked really hard to hit them.
So let's be a little transparent too, right? So we took all the data in, some of that the financial data of cost savings that we talked about a little bit before, some of that the use case data. We took all of that, and Nick created a graph of when we wanted to see certain things happen. And so that's why it became apparent, the date became apparent. Like, we could probably do this in 90 days, right? So, and financially it worked out for us, and everything kind of worked out. But to be transparent, we also did some things that helped move it along. And I like this, I think Nick came up with this one. So on platforms, you have the ability to dial in from a 1-800 number, right? Or have it dial out to you, one of those well, there's a cost to that. So then on one platform, we said, we're not turning off the platform, but what we are doing is not allowing the dial-in anymore. So now on that other platform, it's VoIP only, right? So cost savings within there, knowing that other platform doesn't have the best user experience when using VoIP, so knowing that they would move over. So there were things like that, where we're like, we're not shutting down your tool, but we're showing you the way that this tool is better.
Fantastic. And I promise we will let you ask some questions. But just sort of final question, I guess, from me. So much effort, so much planning, so much success to date. But what about the core use cases that you didn't envisage? What feedback are you hearing about the benefits that users now have that perhaps they didn't have before?
Oh, so we've definitely have been approached about use cases that we didn't foresee coming. That's without a doubt. So, but that's where our agile mindset really benefits us, right? Because we can take that in, take that feedback in, develop on it very quickly, and then turn around a solution very quickly. So, and we've had those. When we started. When we drew the line in the sand, we had business units come in, and their entire business unit had a use case that we hadn't planned for. And we were probably 2 or 3 weeks away from from that line that we drew in the sand. And we had to turn around solutions for them. We were able to do so with Zoom's help, of course.
So, great answer, but let's also talk about just the exciting crap, right? Sorry, language. Wearables, right? We had people that were walking real estate areas that needed to look, so they would come onto a Zoom, right, and have wearables. So we're testing that out. The other use case is Walmart has gas stations, right? They were doing certification checks that we'd have to travel people out to. Well, that has stopped because of Zoom now. Now they can be right at the gas station, do their checks, everybody look back and forth. So that's one use case that we're working on. So all of those little things become more and more exciting. The one that I love, that we're developing the process behind that, whether it's governance or legal and how we're developing that, is the possibility of, hey, we're in a conversation right now. This is a learning, training moment for my team. Click a button and let's get it over to my team channel on MS Stream or wherever. So we're building those connective things through where now you don't have to set up a camera for training. You don't have to, all of a sudden you can go, this is a training moment. Let's move quickly on it and get it to our team. So that kind of call process flow, that's exciting stuff.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay. Please, let's open it up. If you have questions, let us know straight away. Why don't I run to you?
We have a mic in the back too, right?
There's one at the back. Let me get down to you.
Thank you.
Hey, in your transition, you mentioned you had a previous solution in place. How did you transition over? Did you have conference rooms? Did you initially just change them all to Zoom rooms, or did you continue to use your legacy codec and just implement Zoom in that way? And when you did that, how did you pitch all of that to your CFO?
A couple of things that we did, specifically around the conference rooms, right? We were using standard SIP endpoints. So what we've done is use Zoom's Cloud Room Connector, right, which allows us to connect those SIP endpoints into the Zoom cloud. But what we also did was leverage the ability to write code for the controllers. And we basically just added in our own routing within the codec. So we added buttons for Zoom and buttons for our previous platform, and then people could hit that button, dial in their standard number in either one, and then the routing would just happen at that point. And we stood up API servers to help serve some of that down to the codec.
And if you want us to get more specific on it, because it's actually really cool what, as a product owner, what Nick put together. So he's kind of protecting his words. We'll be out back to kind of talk a little bit more after this. But one of the parts of what Nick did is, so we had a different platform before, and you could just one call out to that platform, right? You just dial the meeting ID. We did it all on the back end, right? We wanted to make it that easy with Zoom, but if anybody knows how whether it's a VCS or your gateways work, right? We can't have one company's meeting ID number and another company's meeting ID number, right? So as we looked at the data of coming in for our use case shift, we created a button to the legacy platform at a certain point when we had movement of about 40. We created a button that gave them an extra step. So they have to hit that button to dial the legacy. And then we switched over to have our new platform just be, go ahead and dial your ID. And now if you look at some of our, so it made it easier for them to make the transition, right? So we looked at that data and did that. And now we still have the secondary button up for if you want to dial out to other places and everything like that, but you can also just dial Zoom by dialing in.
So essentially we just made our endpoints dial either platform, so we could have them both in the environment at the same time.
But the key choice, again, going back over, looking at the data, talking and getting feedback, was when Nick was able to go, you know, we're at the point where we're going to make it harder to use the old tool, right, and easier to use the new tool, and it helped with that adoption. No problem.
So I think I've got the mic here. Test, there we go.
There it is.
So Howard Lichtman, Human Productivity Lab. You guys talked about kind of the exotic use cases of like the wearables. What was the culture shift around kind of the classic use cases? Did you guys see more IM go up? Did you see more people doing, hey, I want to share my screen with you kind of instantaneously? What were the big improvements you saw in kind of collaboration internally?
So I can tell you that I don't know from a feature perspective, right? Some of those standard features, I don't know that we see any more of or less of that. Our users were pretty heavy IM, screen sharing, video, audio. They're really pretty good about that stuff. But what I can say is that since our launch, our overall usage is up about 80% this year over last year. So there are more people collaborating over the platform than what we've seen in past years.
And what about the paid minutes versus going down?
Oh, yeah, we can give you that too. So our PSTN dial-in minutes, which is what you wind up, if somebody uses the 800 number, the call me back, you pay a per minute charge for that. We did see that decrease percentage-wise. Our old platform, almost half of our minutes were paid PSTN minutes. In Zoom, we're about 22% of our overall minutes.
And that has to do with the quality, right? The quality of their platform. It has to do with the UI, how you choose to make a call, and it has to do with education that Nick sent out going. When he talked about that personal metric that he sent out in emails, it was, hey, when you use this, you're costing $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And when you use this, you're not.
And that's something we found in a lot of our feedback sessions, actually talking to the users. Most people did it out of convenience, and they had no idea that there was per minute charges to the company for it. And they were like, yeah, if I knew it cost money, I wouldn't do it. I don't really need to do it. I can use the computer audio. They just didn't know. So there was a big education piece there.
And to continue on with that, I'll talk about this real quickly, because this is what's exciting to me, because I'm looking 3 years out. So in our industry, and many of you probably know this, interactive whiteboard, right, has always been a thing. Like, who are we going with? How do we make it work? Our users don't really want to use it the way that it could be collaboratively. They just draw something and save it to a file, right? We've been trying to work this out over and over. What we have found was we took a Zoom room mentality, put it to a third-party touch panel, and suddenly everybody already knew how to use Zoom, and there was just an extra button that said whiteboard, and we started seeing people not only use it, but ask for it. And so we're installing those all over the place. And so without us even doing any whiteboard anything, right, we see adoption because they're already using it on their mobile platform, doing a little whiteboarding, circling stuff. And now we've just made it bigger, put it on a touch panel, and people are gravitating towards that. So I think if we're back here next year talking, I think it's going to be a lot about interactive whiteboard working, true collaboration, how the platform has helped us do that.
There. So, right over here. Here, guys. So you discussed the process and the planning behind it, which sounds great, but let's be honest. To get executives behind, and how did you get your execs on board to say, hey, let's dump this legacy equipment that we have and get on board with Zoom? I mean, I would love to do that in-house, but how do you get them behind? How did you go about getting them behind you?
So twofold there. So for one, we weren't dumping any legacy equipment. We're still using all of the endpoints that we had before. Now, part of that is, we're really not on legacy. We've only got probably 10% legacy devices in our environment today. So everything that we have there is current. We'll utilize it until it's legacy, right? There's no reason to dump equipment that's working. For us, it was more about the platform change, right? It was more about getting them to buy into the new platform and how they can utilize it and how it's going to help their teams so that they can message it down. More so than it was getting buy-in from the perspective of changing a hardware environment, which is a little bit different, I think.
User experience was something we focused on. Like, are you having a better experience coming in mobile as we're changing our way of working and where we work and how we work? Are we making it easier? So we told that story. And I'll be straight up, financials. Like, it was we just told the financial story of what we had been paying and where we're going. And what we could be paying for a better platform, and that's how we won it. Yeah. Go ahead. You guys pick the people.
Hey, I had a quick question. What was that criteria then that you used for picking Zoom over some of those other platforms, right? So I noticed you had Slack, WebEx, Skype. I got to imagine an organization of your size has all that stuff around, right? So what was it? Sure. Did you do a bake-off? Was it just you had some pilots and everybody just loved Zoom over everything else? Like, what was the criteria you used for making that selection? So
from our side, we had a platform that wasn't working. I talked about optimizing internally, and then we realized that platform wasn't working. So yes, we dug in and looked at architecture, right? We're a global company. So we need to make sure that wherever people are coming in from, they're having a good experience. The footprint of Zoom was very impressive. Just the architecture they were built on a mobile-first kind of concept and idea, and that's really where the world is going. So make it work here really well, it's gonna work on your desktop really well. So all of those things were part of it, and again, the financials, we had to work on that. Like, you had to tell the story because, well, I won't go deep into it. I won't go deep into that, but I will say there was potentially more of a cost to Zoom that we were concerned about. In the end, it worked out, right? Between paid minutes and all of that and user experience, but we told that whole story.
Yeah, I think the final nail in the coffin was the user experience, right? That's kind of, when we started the early stages, it was really digging on the technical, look at Zoom's footprint, where's their architecture at, where are their data centers located, how does that help us, does it help us? But in the end, when we were making a final decision, it was really, how does this affect our associates? Does it affect them in a positive way? Because if it does, then that's probably the direction that we need to go in, and that's what we came up with.
The right thing to do.
The overall experience for our associates was better.
Yeah, so you referenced soft phones a few times in your presentation.
Yeah.
And with 2.3 million users, did you guys actually migrate everyone off of their work phones to Zoom
so
for work purposes?
In process of that. We are not there yet, but we're in the process of doing that, yes.
Is it in pilot mode, or do you actually have people live where you've basically moved numbers over?
So soft phone's not live
yet. Yeah, soft phone is live. To a certain extent, I can make calls on it. It shows my office number. It goes out to their cloud service. I don't want to dig in too deep where we're going with that right now because there's some NDA stuff that is NDA, right? But we want to get them to that call escalation path. So no, next year at Zoomtopia, when we're sitting up here, we'll be talking about the numbers we've moved over to soft phone.
But I think Zoom soft phone is still in beta. Is that right? So yeah, we've got a ways to go on that one still.
But again, everybody that works for Zoom, next year when we're up here, we'll be talking about how we moved over to the soft phone, right?
That's all right.
Okay.
All right.
Over here?
Yes, sir.
Well, you kind of already answered it, but how do you go after those who are it's really difficult to transition over? So, for example, like Slack, they come with a video conference session. You can create your own without having to incur any cost. And these platforms are already vested in by these groups. So how do you go after them when the ROI value is not that obvious? And how do you convince them to make them say it's a better experience versus their native functionality with Slack?
That's a good question. Rick Toole, how do we finally win you over? This is my SME in the collaboration area, right? A technical expert. it just worked beautifully, right? So,
Yeah.
but even on our own team, we had hard cases like that. So we reached out and had conversations. Those customer feedback sessions were huge, right? And we didn't hide anything. When they were like, we don't like this, why don't you like it? What can we be doing better? And Zoom was in there listening at the same time, so.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's really about building a use case, right? Talking to people about what their needs are and making sure that you have everything in place to suit those needs.
And we had to tuck our egos. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but Nick and I have some egos going on. Or maybe it's just me. I can't tell.
You got enough for both of us.
That one's going on workplace. Nice job. So we had to really tuck our egos in as technologists and engineers and product owners and say, tell us the bad stuff. Tell us what you don't like. And we heard a lot of, not from the Zoom side, but in our meetings, we hate this about how we're communicating. You're failing here. Like, how do we fix that? And then we bound those together with the use case of this is how we think we're going to fix it. Here's our roadmap. Move forward with us and build that trust.
And that really is the hard part a lot of times, is to step back as a technologist and convince yourself that you don't always know what's best, right? Your customers know what they need, so that's really where your focus should be.
Well said.
Yeah.
We have time for a couple more questions.
Hi.
So,
Okay. So question, you mentioned that 22% of your call minutes right now are still the pay-as-you-go, so calling back. What are some of the techniques that y'all are using to kind of drive that down even more, and things that you've seen that have worked so far to help get folks to actually use?
It's a great question. So to be completely transparent, absolutely nothing. we switched to Zoom. So that's honestly going to be a focus, right? Because we think we can drive it down farther than that. So once we get to that point where we're turning off our old platforms and we've got the enterprise solidified on Zoom, then we're going to go back through and we'll tailor a communications plan around PSTN dial-in and trying to educate users on what the cost is there to try to drive that usage down farther. But that 55–60% cut that we've seen already is literally just from moving to Zoom.
The UI.
The UI, the video quality, the audio quality, and the tool just kind of floats you into computer audio. Really doesn't. So it's just, it was a natural shift.
But part of that, and this is important, and I don't know if Zoom will like this or not, but part of it is those conversations of being transparent that we were talking about before, and Zoom came in all salesy. Sorry, Jed. And they're like, just like, hey, we're gonna reduce your paid minutes by 70%, right? Wow, okay, that sounds great, you know. And I had a slide up there that said, honesty, the best policy, keeping their word. When we were talking about contracts and SLAs, that continually came up. And they kept saying, no, we're going to do it. We're going to do it by 70%. And we're kind of like, yeah, we'll see. You know, we have a culture of people want, and we just held them to it. And you know what? That's been working out. Now we're going to hold our team to it to reduce it even more. I'm going to hold my team. And then that's going to be our focus as we go with smartphone and start building out this platform that we've been road mapping. But really, it was keeping them to their word. We'll keep to our word and move forward. The other thing I really did like, which we'll probably end up doing, was a campaign of very specific users. Your meetings are costing us $1,000 a month. It doesn't seem like a lot, but if there's 2.5 million of you, right, that gets quickly. So people at Walmart do take accountability for that. So if you give them that messaging, right, they will say, wow, I don't really need to be spending $1,000 a month of the company's money. We could do it a better way as a team, and so that helped.
I guess my question is, I really liked how you said you tailor Zoom for your leader or for the user. I guess I'm really interested in how, I know you collect the data with how they're going to want to use it, and you know, but how would you, or maybe the hardest part in being able to have them use the Zoom to its fullest ability, as into a presentation, without a learning curve, or because there's always that learning curve, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm really interested how you get through that.
So to take it a step farther than just knowing the data and the usage, we actually went and sat in rooms with those teams and talked to them about how they're using it, right? Especially some of our higher end users, right? The guys that are out there every day doing hours and hours and hours worth of hosting. We wanted to make sure that we sat down with those teams, talked through what they were doing, how they were trying to do it, and just partnered with them to figure out what features best suited their business case and what they were doing. And then showed them how to use those features and how to best utilize them. So.
And we're very lucky. One of my peers, Justin Powell, runs our user experience group, right? So we have a group of people that will look at how are you clicking through, right? How are you using your mobile? They'll do tests like that, and we'll take that data and then kind of craft the tool around that and bring it back into our product lifecycle. Everybody that doesn't have that opportunity that we have at Walmart, having a UX team like that, Zoom has a UX team, right, that talks through that. Chris brought them on to have conversations with our UX team because he was our customer satisfaction. Is that your title? Sorry, Chris. I just call him Chris, but he's the one that helps make it work. So they have that, right? So your vendors should have that, and they should be ready to bring those people in and have those transparent conversations with your users to say, no, this is how we use it, right? And watch how they use it so that they can bring it back into their product.
And I will give Chris and team some extra props there because from a partnership perspective, they've done a really great job of being available and ready when we need them to help provide training to users, whether it be international markets, whether it be pulling their own team members in Japan to do translated training to our Japanese associates. They've just been there available and ready to go. So they do a great job.
Well, thank you guys again. Really appreciate it. Let's give one more round of applause to Casey and Nick.